Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Be Bold America. I'm your host, Jill Cody, along with my co-host, Dr. Pettis Perry. Hey, Pettis, my dear friend, was Bellingham terribly affected by that horrendous heat dome over the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, we had it for about a week, my friend. It was a real scorcher. And the problem for us is that most of us don't have the air conditioning to get through it, relatively unscathed. But I survived it, and I'm ready to move on. Thanks for asking, my friend. How are you doing?
Of course. Well, in Santa Cruz, it's 73 degrees right now, but where I live in Carmel, we haven't seen the sun in 2 weeks. The fog has just taken over the coast. Our program today is One Race, the Human Race. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968, was the catalyst for an elementary school teacher to teach her class the next day about diversity. The lesson plan she created was known as the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes exercise. The shocking results began a nationwide controversy. That teacher, Dr. Jane Elliott, is our honored and bold interview guest. Still today, the fiery Dr. Jane Elliott has plenty to say about racism in America. Jane's life has been dedicated, and she's extremely impatient about it, to exposing prejudice and bigotry for what it is, an irrational class system based upon purely arbitrary factors. And, as she says, if you think this does not apply to you, you are in for a rude awakening. Our future depends on that awakening. Pettis, I think you would like the pleasure of introducing our bold guest. Am I right?
You are absolutely correct, my friend.
So take it away.
Thanks. Thank you. I've been waiting for an opportunity to speak with Dr. Elliott since I first learned about her work during my undergraduate studies. So I am very excited about today's show. Dr. Jane Elliott is an internationally known educator, lecturer, and diversity trainer. Her Blue Eye, Brown Eye exercise in 1968 had shocking and controversial results, so much so that in 1970, ABC created a documentary titled Eye of the Storm to explain it. Then in 1985, Frontline filmed a documentary, A Class Divided, that included a reunion of the school children who had been featured in Eye of the Storm. A televised edition of the exercise was shown on October 29, 2009, titled The Event, How Racist Are You? She appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show 5 times and was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Learn more about Dr. Jane Elliott at janeelliott.com. Welcome to Be Bold America, Dr. Elliott.
Well, thank you. I'm really delighted to be here.
Dr. Elliott, for those who are listening now and who will be listening to our podcast and who haven't heard about the Blue Eye, Brown Eye exercise, would you explain what it is, why you were motivated after Dr. King's assassination to present the exercise to your students?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes of the month in February, and he was dead at the hands of an assassin on April 4th. And he had been one of our heroes. And I had to find a way to explain to my students not why he was killed, but why he was in the street, what he was protesting. Because white people would say, well, those blacks have got it so good, what are they complaining about? Look at all the things we do for them. And I thought, look at what you've done. You've taken a person whose only aim was to bring hope to a group of people who had no hope not because of the color of their skin, but because of the ignorance about skin color in the United States of America. And I was born in 1933 when Adolf Hitler came to power. Adolf Hitler and Franklin Roosevelt came to power in the same year. And I watched my father just infuriated by what Adolf Hitler was doing until 1945 at the end of the Second World War. And I knew, because I had read extensively about Adolf Hitler, that one of the ways they decided who went into the gas chamber during the Nazi years was eye color. So I decided that the next day, if we were going to talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr., and if my students didn't understand what I was saying, couldn't imagine how that would happen, I decided that the next morning, since our lesson plan for the day was to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins," I decided that the next day I would allow some of my students to walk in the shoes of a person of color in this country for a day. And I would do what Adolf Hitler did. I I would treat my students positively or negatively on the basis of the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in that class were blue-eyed, I decided that blue-eyed people would be on the bottom the first day because they didn't dare let the power be with the group that was on the top. So I went to my classroom determined to talk about it, and then if they wanted to have an experience instead of just talking, I would separate my students according to the color of their eyes and treat my students who had the wrong color eyes, which would be blueies, the way we treat people of color in this country on a daily basis. I didn't know how this exercise would work. If I had known how it would work, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because if I had known that my children would be beaten and spit on, their belongings would be destroyed, they would be verbally and physically and psychologically abused by their peers, by their teachers, and by the parents of some of their peers, I wouldn't have done the exercise. If I had known that my parents would lose their business because of that exercise, I wouldn't have done it. If I had known what my husband knew, because he rode back and forth to a job with men from that area, if I had known how deeply ingrained racism was in that community, I wouldn't have done that exercise. I wouldn't have put my family through that. But I didn't know. And so I went into my classroom the next day. We talked about what had happened. I asked them if they had any idea how it would feel to be something other than white. No. Would you like? No. Yeah. I said, would you like to do something today that will help you to know that? Yeah, let's, because what we did in my classroom was fun. They thought this was going to be fun, so I separated them according to the color of their eyes, and I watched my blue-eyed people live down to my expectations of them, become unable to function in a learning situation, could not remember what they had learned the next day, and I watched brown-eyed students, 4 brown-eyed dyslexic boys, read words I knew they couldn't read and spell words they couldn't spell until they had the right color eyes, and they lived up to and far exceeding any expectation that any teacher had of those children previous to that exercise. It was absolutely terrifying. And my first thought was, my God, if this is what happens, and they caught on within 5 minutes. I thought, if this is what happens with little third graders, 9-year-olds, in half an hour, and this is how it affects them in a learning situation, what must it be like for children who go through this 24 hours a day from the moment of their birth until after they're dead? And at that moment, it became my purpose to educate people about the total ignorance of believing that skin color is a predictor of intelligence or an indication of our worth as a human being. And since that day, April 5th of 1968, that has been what I do. It doesn't make me loved. It doesn't make me accepted. It doesn't increase the number of my friends or get the approval of my relatives. However, that's not what I'm on earth for, to get friends or to get the approval of my relatives. What I'm on earth for now is to educate people to the ignorance, that total ignorance of judging people by the color of their skin. It makes no sense at all. It has to be stopped.
Well, I'm very thankful as a person of color for the work that you do, and I'll hopefully have a chance a little bit later to give you my thanks. And I'm sorry that your family had to go through what they went through. So I'm guessing this was a learning experience for everyone. So I take it this wasn't a spontaneous decision, that this was something you might have been thinking about for some time?
I was thinking about it from the time I was born and heard my father talking about Adolf Hitler and what he's doing to a group of people on the basis of their religion. But then I realized that 10 million people had been killed by that man and his cohorts, and only half of them were Jewish. The rest of them were people who had physical or mental disabilities, who were the wrong color, who were the wrong religion. It was kill what you needed to in order to succeed in the idea of creating a world that was run by pale, stale males. I'm sorry, but this whole thing is all about, and it all started with religion. This whole racism business started with religion during the Spanish Inquisition. They were going to turn everybody into Catholics and killed a bunch of people and then realized that some of the people they had killed were already Christians, and then they knew you couldn't tell what a person's religion was by looking at them, so they said, we'll have to find a new way to decide who would deserve to be killed and who probably isn't Christian, and they set upon skin color. And that's when people began to be called white and black. Make no mistake about this, there are no white people on Earth. People don't come in that color. And there are no black people on Earth. Now, if you want to know what happens, if you are truly close to white, Google Tanzania and look what happens to albinos in Tanzania. And only if you're an albino are you purely white, and even they are purely white because there's color in their eyes. You need to realize that the idea of blackness and whiteness came up because white is the color of purity and goodness. Look in the dictionary. Black is the color of savagery and evil. And as long as you separate people into two polar opposite groups, that's how long you'll continue to have this problem. It's based on total ignorance. This started in about 1490-something. Those who insist on continuing to use the vocabulary, white and black, of the 14th century, then must agree to use the communication and transportation things that they did in the 14th and 15th century. I don't think most people want to walk to work or buy horses to ride to work. And I don't think that most males want to wear knee breeches and powdered wigs to work. But if you're going to live the way they did in the 14th and 15th century, I suggest that you go back to that in every other way too. Otherwise, give up the idea of 4 or 5 different races. There's only one. There's only one race of people on the face of the earth, and that's the human race. And if you tell me that you're biracial, I have to say to you, which of your parents came from outer space? Because if your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents came from this planet, you are a member of the human race, period.
I love the way that you talk about this. Jill, I know you have a bunch of questions for Dr. Elliott.
Well, I'm sitting on the edge of my chair right now, but I think it's a good time to just take our break and come back after that. It'll just be a minute. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the ksqd.org website. Our topic today is One Race, the Human Race. If you have any ideas for the show, you may reach Pettis or me by emailing info@ksqd.org. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Here's a fun fact for you. The average chameleon can point their eyes in 2 different directions. On the other hand, the average human can't. So unless you're a chameleon, there's absolutely no way you can focus on texting and driving at the same time. So don't do it, unless you're a chameleon.
Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org.
Now back to our bold and impressive guest, Dr. Jane Elliott. Dr. Elliott is an internationally known educator, lecturer, diversity trainer, and recipient of the National Mental Health Association Award for Excellence in Education. She exposes prejudice and bigotry for what it is, an irrational class system based upon purely arbitrary factors. And if you think this does not apply to you, she says, you are in for a rude awakening. Now, Dr. Elliott, I do have a question for you, and that is that when Pettis and I talked about your interview, I felt that he should take the lead because he is a diversity trainer, and so are you, and that it's difficult for me to talk about racism as a white woman because I don't have a theoretical background on the topic. But he said that white people need to have this discussion. How can I and other white individuals have this discussion around racism?
How can you not have this discussion around racism?
Yes.
Particularly in view of the fact that within 30 years, white people will be a numerical minority in the United States of America. And if we don't change our behaviors today, this is called self-defense. If we don't change our behaviors today, we are going to be extremely uncomfortable in the future. We need every person who is afraid to talk about race has to say to themselves, this is a matter of self-preservation. We've got to talk about critical race theory, because what critical race theory does is describe what happened in the past so that we can see what we are responsible for doing in the present which will create the future. We have to know about those. Somebody has said, those who forget the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. For the last 4 years, we have been repeating the mistakes of the past, where racism, ageism, sexism, homophobia, ethnocentrism were concerned. We have been encouraged for the last 4 years to behave in racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric ways. We're going to take at least 15, 20, maybe 30 years to re-educate our people out of the idea of several different races and out of the idea of the superiority of the so-called white race. There is no white race. The only reason people have lighter colored skin is because those brilliant people from Africa left the area of the equator and moved from there afoot and in boats and on camels or whatever they could find, moved from there, and as they moved farther and farther from the equator, they moved farther and farther north, their bodies produced less and less melanin, so their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. The only reason we have lighter skin, those of us who came out of Ireland, is because our ancestors moved farther from the equator, and so our skin, our hair, and our eyes are lighter than those of people who stayed in Africa. If people haven't read the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, they'd better get it and read it, because one of the first things you're going to learn in that is 4,000 years, 4,000, not 100, 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, people in the Nile Valley, which is in Egypt, which is a country in Africa, were doing cataract surgery with metal instruments before there was ever such a thing heard of in the Americas, in Asia, or in Europe. Now think about the brilliance of those people of color, of those who are melanaceous or melanotic people. If you don't have enough melanin in your skin to keep your cells safe from the sun, you're melanemic. If you have more melanin in your skin, you're melanaceous. If you have a lot of it, you're melanotic. All that is an indication of the amount of melanin in your skin. There's nothing positive or negative in those three words. What it is a description of fact. It is the amount of melanin in your skin. Those brilliant melanotic and melanaceous people were able to leave the area of the equator and populate every landmass on the face of the earth, including Japan and China. And if you don't believe that, then you get the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. Just take the map that's in there that shows where we came from and where they went and how we got to where we are. Look at that map, have it enlarged, have it laminated, and hang it on the wall of your office, of your church, wherever you see people gathering. Put that map up so that people realize that we're all in this together. We're all members of the same race, and we all came from the same place.
Now, Dr. Elliott, could you repeat the name of the book that you referenced again?
Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization.
Nile Valley Contributions. Okay.
To Civilization. You have to read it. And you have to read the book, The Myth of Race, by Robert Wald Sussman. Now, the only problem with that book is he called it The Myth of Race. A myth is something that we make up to explain something in nature that we don't understand. The Greeks had a myth that said the sun was a god in a golden chariot that flew across the sky every morning. We found out that that wasn't true. A myth is something that explains something in nature. A lie is something that we make up to justify our unacceptable behaviors. And that's what the idea of race is. And you need to know that the word race came out of France in 1580. A word to separate people into certain groups. A race of people, meaning certain group of people, that word was only in existence with the meaning that we use today in 1580. Think how short a time this idea has been around, and how much of that time we have been absolutely wrong in how we treat people not because of the color of their skin, but because of our ignorance about skin color and what causes it. Do you have any idea the amount of brilliance that we have managed not to take advantage of in our treatment of people of color? I don't think you do. I don't think any child of color, particularly any child that we call black in this country, and they aren't black, they're melanaceous and melanotic. But if they have more than the acceptable amount of melanin in their skin in this country, we consider them less than. For the love of heaven, we got our idea about an afterlife from the Egyptians who are in Africa. Our alphabet, our ability to tell time, mathematics, all these things came from a country in Africa. Do you realize what we've given up by believing the lie of several different races?
Pettis,
I sound a little angry, a little passionate about this.
No,
I am.
That's why I call you fiery. We love it. We love that fire that you're sharing with us. Pettis?
Yeah, Jill, thank you. Dr. Elliott, I'd like to pick up on this idea of race. I believe it was manufactured to support the idea that one group is superior to another. And I believe the fundamental problem is what we now call white supremacy. The notion that white people are superior to all others, and that racism is really a tool used to justify the existence of supremacy and discrimination. What thoughts might you have about that?
Well, I'll tell you, the main thought I have about that is only 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is classified as white. Think about that. 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is classified as white. And that is a lie, too, because there are no white people. We all come in shades of brown because we all have melanin in our skin, because we are all descendants of those first modern human beings who evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. The idea of white superiority is the result of we palefaces colonizing other countries and having the firepower to make them agree to go along to get along. And we're still doing that. And we have to put a stop to it. We have to realize that we had a president for 4 years who said we're going to put a wall across the southern border of the United States to keep those brown-skinned people out, because brown-skinned people reproduce too rapidly. You see, someone must have told him about the book written by Ben Wattenberg that says that the main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white people being born in this country. If we don't do something about this and do it soon, white people will become a numerical minority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, that was in his first book, The Birthed Earth. That's what he said the first time he published that book. And he got so many ugly statements about it that he republished the book and filled it full of tables and charts and graphs that prove what he was saying without having to come right out and say it. Now, you look at those charts and tables and graphs and you say to yourselves, wait a minute. Benjamin Disraeli said there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. So this man, Ben Wattenberg, who was a brilliant man, and he is no longer living, but he was a brilliant man while he was alive, but he had enough sense to realize that he really made a big mistake when he wrote the first paragraph of that first book. So then he comes back with all these charts and tables and graphs to tell us what he means, but not to come right out and say it. You have to realize you've been had, folks. You've been badly had. People who write books, for instance, White Fragility. There are no white people, and we are not fragile. If we were fragile, we would not be doing what we do to other people. We're angry now, and we're scared. What I see every time I give a speech is a whole lot of pale-faced people, melanemic people, who are scared to death. And they will say this. I had women stand up and say, well, if those people get power, and I know who she's talking about, if those people get power, are they going to want to do to us what we have done to them? And I say, no, they're smarter than that. They know they don't want to get even. They want to get equity. They want to get what they're promised in the Constitution, which is equal treatment under the law. They don't want to get even. They know what getting even causes how it disrupts a society. If you are in the business of trying to prove that you are superior by killing the greatest number of people. People of color don't want to do that. They want to get equal treatment under the law. They are promised that in the Constitution. Well, of course, they weren't promised that in the Constitution because Thomas Jefferson arranged to have black people termed as only 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. Well, we wiped that out finally. Finally let people of color vote. Now we're in a situation, because of the last 4 years, with a racist, extremely racist chief executive, we now have all over the United States of America who are trying to write legislation and pass legislation, the legislators are, that will keep people of color from voting. Because make no mistake about this, black and brown women saved this democracy last November by going to the polls in huge numbers and voting Mr. Donosaurus T. Rump out of office. We all are still being a nation that has democracy to those black and brown women, and we'd better be aware of that. And we'd better be very, very grateful to them for that, and we'd better hope that they don't watch Fox News anymore, and so they won't learn the lie of the superiority of white people. White people aren't superior, they don't exist. Get over it. We white folks don't exist. We are different shades of brown. Look at the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. There are 3 pages there of pictures of people of different colors. And under each one of them is the word Pantone and then a number. There's a number for every flesh color on the Pantone color wheel. Get the Pantone color wheel. Put it on the wall. Have your children go up to the Pantone color wheel. Put their hands or their fingers against those colors. Don't put their palms, because we all have pretty much the same color palms. Turn so that the back of their hand is against those colors until they find the color of their skin. It'll be a number. You don't want a number? People say, I want a number. I always get some woman who says, I don't want a number. And I say, wait a minute. Do you pay into Social Security? Well, yes, but that's different. No, that's the number. That's the number. That's your Social Security number. Get real here, fool. Have your kids look up that color and then go to the thesaurus and look up synonyms for brown. And there are about 100 synonyms for brown in Roget's thesaurus. Have the kid pick out the number, the color that he thinks might be the color of his skin. Then go to the dictionary and look up that color. And he'll find out whether or not that's the color of his skin. A couple of young melanaceous people called me several months ago and said, we've decided that from now on, when we have to fill in a form that says race, we're going to put human. I said, that's wonderful. That's the only race there is. However, what are you going to put if it says skin color? One of them said, I'm going to put mocha. The other one said, I'm going to put chocolate. That makes good sense, people. There's nothing negative about your skin color unless you call yourselves white and black. You set yourself up to fail. You set yourself up to be diametrically opposed to one another. If one of you is white and the other is black, look at the dictionary, look up the definition for white and the definition for black, and then decide whether you want your child to go to school and have that ignorant educator say, oh, there's a little black boy in my class. You know, somebody, in the fall, in a month from now, some teacher, and I'm not saying educator because they aren't educators, an educator leads people out of ignorance. You can't lead people out of ignorance if you're referring to them as white and black. But some teacher is going to stand up in front of a group of students and say, when I see people, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just see people as people. And she's going to expect those kids to say, oh, that's wonderful, thank you. Someday, some child is going to stand up and say, do you see white? You forgot to mention them. Mm-hmm. Teachers have to stop making racist statements and while pretending that they aren't racist. I'll never forget the day a young woman, a young pale-faced woman, diddled up to, and diddle means take short steps, short, quick steps, up to Linda Guillory, tall, aggressive Linda Guillory, and said to her, Linda, when I see you, I don't see you black. I backed up because I thought there's going to be bloodshed here, and I've got to wear this suit tomorrow. I thought she was going to punch that woman's lights out. Instead, Linda Guillory looked at that fool and said, I think you have a severe eye problem. Let's make an appointment with the optometrist so that we can get your eyes fixed. That woman did away from her faster than she did it up to her, let me tell you. And I don't believe she'll ever say that to a person of color again.
Oh, I'm still sitting on the edge of my chair, Dr. Elliott. We need to take another brief break. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. In addition, if you'd like to be added to our news group, you may text Be Bold America to 22828. Text Be Bold America to 22828. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's Progressive Talking Conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag, you're it.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Dr. Jane Elliott, and our topic is One Race, the Human Race. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, Dr. Elliott turned on her television and learned of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Elliott, when watching TV that night, vividly remembers a scene in which a white reporter pointed his microphone toward a local black leader and asked things like, when our leader, referring to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, was killed several years ago, his widow held us together. Who's going to control your people? Right then, after hearing that reporter's question, she decided her third graders must learn about racism. Dr. Elliott, I know you wanted to talk about evangelicals, and I have a couple of statistics here where 22% of evangelicals are adherent to QAnon. 24% believe it's okay to resort to violence for their cause. 84% voted for Trump, and evangelicals voted higher for Trump in 2020 than in 2016. And so far, there are 40 critical race theory and QAnon adherents running for office. 38 are Republican and 2 are independents, mainly for school boards. So what is your take on people that adhere to critical race theory and QAnon running for school boards?
Number one, critical race theory and QAnon are not synonymous. You need to know that critical race theory is an attempt to make us aware of what has happened in the past and what we are responsible for doing, not in the past, but in the present, to make the future better. That is not what QAnon is all about. QAnon doesn't understand what critical race theory is all about. You need to look up critical race theory and don't take any information that comes off Fox News or off Facebook. Stay away from Facebook and Fox News, absolutely, because they're lying to you on a daily basis. Critical race theory is an attempt to educate people about the ignorance of the past and to bring them to an awareness of what is in our future unless we change our behavior and our education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And you can't do that by teaching that there are several different races. And you can't do that by refusing to allow students. And the critical race theory isn't being taught in grades K through 12. It's being taught at the college level. But you also need to understand that they've done studies in this country that prove that the longer you stay in school, the more bigoted you become. Because the longer you're in school, the longer you are reinforced in what you learned in grades K through 12. Which is based on things like Columbus discovered America. Now, get over it, people. You can't discover a place where people are already living. Columbus was a latecomer to this continent. People of color from Africa came here about 10,000 years before Columbus was a gleam in his father's eye. That's one of the things that you learn in critical race theory. Here is the truth, folks. Here is what really happened. We cannot be held responsible for what happened in the past. We can be held responsible for what we do in the present to make the future better. I think it's time for us to, I know, it's time for us to stop pretending that we teach the 3 R's so it's okay. You also need to understand that in the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, only one of them begins with R, and that's reading. Writing begins with W, and arithmetic begins with A. So some teacher's going to say, I teach the 3 R's. And somebody who knows the difference is going to say, oh, you mean reading and writing that begins with W and arithmetic that begins with A. Do you want to change that statement? It's time for us to start teaching the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility. Educators who are paid by the taxpayers and by the parents of the children that they're educating have to realize that it's up to the educators to teach their students that every person on the campus has rights, the same rights, and their rights have to be respected. And if you don't respect their rights, you will be held responsible for that. And to see someone of a different color and to automatically assume that they don't have the rights that you have is to ignore the rights of that person, to fail to respect that person's rights, and you should be held responsible for that. And not just the students, but the educators, the administrators, the people who come in to talk to the students, the coaches. They should all be absolutely re-educated, and so should the police departments. I don't want to defend police departments. I want to re-educate police departments. I want them to realize that the color of a person's skin is now how you decide whether or not he or she might have committed a crime. And right now, we are going to let out of prison a whole lot of people who were put in prison because of President Clinton's 3 strikes you're out, based on your having drugs in your possession. We are legalizing marijuana and the use of marijuana all over the United States because we're finding out that the Native Americans were right when they said, this is something that can make you feel better, make you healthier, use it. Now we are legalizing marijuana, and many of the melanatic males who were put in prison during the Clinton's years are there because of their use of or sale of marijuana. It's time for us to provide justice for them, justice for all of us. But you see, in this country, justice is for just us, meaning just us pill folks. That's the way it's been run, and if you don't believe that, get the book, The Color of Law. Everybody has to read the book, The Color of Law, by Richard Rothstein. Read the book, The Color of Law. And if you don't want to read the whole thing, just read pages, I believe it's pages 216 and 218. It will blow you away when you realize how badly you have been misinformed. Yeah, pages, I think it's 215 and 218. Yeah, read pages 216 and 217. Go to the library, take the book, The Color of Law, off the shelf, turn to pages 216 and 217, and read what kinds of things are happening in this country today because of people who were educated in the same way that you and I are. Lawyers learn the same thing that we learned. It says, in the 20th century, federal, state, and local officials did not resist majority opinions with regard to race. Instead, they endorsed and reinforced it actively and aggressively because they know that racism is a profitable venture. If you don't believe that, then you get the book, Rich Thanks to Racism, by Jim Freeman. Read this book this week, people. Don't wait. Read this book this week. Rich Thanks to Racism, How the Ultra-Wealthy Profit from Racial Injustice, by Jim Freeman. Read this book. It will blow you away. And after you read that one, then get Robert Rice's book, The System. And you will find out that 196 mostly white males are the ones who are running this country today, and you need to know what's in store for all of us unless we change the system.
I'm breathless. It's just a fabulous discussion. Pettis?
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about the white evangelical groups and how they're moving us towards becoming what they want to see as a white Christian nation?
Here's what you need to know about the white evangelical groups. Get the book Crazy for God by Frank Schaeffer. I can't tell you all you need to know about the evangelical system, but you get Frank Schaeffer's books, Crazy for God and Angry with God, and read those books, and you all of a sudden you'll find out that, oh good Lord, Frank Schaeffer brought the evangelical faith to this country. His father started it in the UK. He taught it to his son. Frank Schaeffer brought it to this country. He taught it to people in this country, and he now says, stay away from the evangelical faith. It has been completely out of recognition. It is nothing like what his father started, and nothing like what Frank Schaeffer wanted to bring to this country. It has been twisted to a political situation, a political statement. And one of the groups who got this fool elected 5 years ago, are members of the evangelical faith. You want to lose your democracy? Follow these people, and you'll find out you will lose your democracy. Women will lose the right to do what they've been able to do for only about 50 years in this country. It took us a long time to get women's rights. And during the Trump administration, women's rights were once again beginning to be denied. This is the scariest time that I have lived through in my life. And because of my age, I have lived through a third of the history of the United States. I'm not talking out of, I know what I'm talking about because I study this situation a lot, and I've lived a long time. I watched some wonderful things happen. I thought when Barack Obama was elected, I thought, now I don't have to do this work anymore. Because I forgot about the anger of the melanemic people who are not going to give up the hold they have on power in this country. They will do whatever they have to see to it that they perpetuate the myth of race and the idea that there are 3 or 4 different races, and the whiter you are, the brighter you are. It's a lie based on a lie, and we've got to realize that it is. Children of color, particularly Hispanic children and children, African American children, have to realize that they come from groups of people who knew the difference between right and wrong before these melanemic people began to have power. And if every person who's listening to this thing, if there's anybody left now, and I know a whole lot of people have left in disgust, and that's fine, I understand that. I understand why white people don't want to give up their whiteness, and I understand why blacks don't want to give up their blackness. But we're all in this thing together, people, and you have to realize that there's only one race. We have to start now. Teach that to our children. Teach our children the truth. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. And then you want to talk about Christianity. You want to talk about evangelical faith. Do you realize that Jesus was an Ethiopian Jew, that he had kinky woolly hair and feet of bronze? And that's what it says. It doesn't say Ethiopian Jew, but that's what biblical scholars have discovered. But in the Bible, it says he had feet of bronze and kinky woolly hair. How often do you see a picture of Jesus that looks like that? Only in a black church. People, get real here. Come into the 21st century.
Well, I did want to
preach this crap.
I did want to say, Dr. Elliott, that Frank Schaeffer has been on Be Bold America, and he did say that the evangelical root belief is that America was designed and given by God to be a white European Christian country, and it was their promised land. And he's coming back again on October 24th, later in the fall. And it's time for another break. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Want a friend to hear this program? I hope you do. Ask them to subscribe for free to their favorite podcast platform. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, and many more. To hear every one of our shows, they're there. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
KSQD is one station with many voices that speak to our unique community in real time. Our great music programming is a soundtrack that makes the good times even better, and we're here to help you through all the ups and downs by keeping you informed with the facts. But in order to do that, we need your help. You can donate by visiting ksqd.org and clicking on Support.
Today our topic is One Race, the Human Race, and we're speaking with Dr. Jane Elliott. Dr. Elliott's classroom exercise was documented in 1970 in an ABC documentary titled The Eye of the Storm. And then the PBS series Frontline featured a reunion of the 1970 class in an episode called A Class Divided, which I saw yesterday and thought was excellent. It's still on the Frontline website. In addition, Dr. Elliott has directed the exercise and lectured on its effects in many places throughout the world. Now, Pettis, I'm going to hand it over to you next.
Thanks, Jill. Before we close out the show, Dr. Elliott, I wanted to just let you know that you greatly impacted my life and the trajectory of the life that I've chosen for myself. I grew up in a household that had about 3,000 books in our library, most of which are now in a museum. But my parents were great historians. So I had a steeped understanding of American history. And then in community college, as I noted earlier, I came across your work, and I also came across Paulo Freire's work on pedagogy of the oppressed, in which he coined the term conscientization, which is the process of becoming conscious that there needs to be a change. So I am deeply indebted to you for your work. I love your work and I follow your work because you set me on a path of trying to understand the psychodynamics of racism as well as the historical facts about racism. So I just want to say thank you for your work and the many years you have devoted to this topic. It has been invaluable, I think, not only here, but globally. Thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I appreciate it. But you need to know that every black woman in the United States knows more about racism than I'll ever learn. She has no choice but to know. And we've got to stop calling this country America. We've got to start calling this country the United States of America. The word united is the most important part of that title. For the last 4 years, we've had a president who has tried to divide us. These are the United States of America. America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. Those are the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America. Every person who is a citizen of any of those countries is an American. But we are the United States of America. We are 50 states united, and we want to stay that way. And by the end of Mr. Biden's term, we may be the 52 United States of America. But let's stop saying America. That is so arrogant of us to say America, as if these 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States are all there is to America. No, America is everything. As I said, let's call this the United States of America, and let's live like United States of American citizens.
Pettis, do you have a follow-up, or do you want me to take it?
Why don't you take it?
Well, in these last few minutes, Dr. Elliott, what could listeners keep doing, stop doing, start doing?
I thought you never asked.
Good. Good.
At JaneElliott.com. Download the printed learning materials. The first is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. And people of color need to read those because they've heard all of them. Then you go to the clarifications of those statements. Read the first one. I can't remember where it is, but read the first one and then read the clarification of it. This is how it is perceived by the people hearing it. And then you will know these are the statements, people of color, you have the right to respond to in a negative way. And these are the statements you melanating people you ought not to be making. After you do that, go through the commitments to combat racism. I think there are 18 things that each one of us can do in our own environment to change the level of our own racism. And now somebody is thinking, racism is a societal problem. Societies are made up of individuals. And when individuals refuse to go along with racism, we can destroy racism. After you've done those activities, then go to pick out one of those commitments to combat racism, which you've never done before, and do it for a month. Circle the one you chose, put the date beside it, and then at the end of the month, take out that paper and make some notes to yourself about what you learned by doing it. Go through all 18 of those. I think it's 18 commitments. And while you're doing those commitments, go to the bibliography. Read every book on the bibliography under race. And now someone is thinking, well, what about we LGBTQ people? What about you LGBTQ people? We treat LGBTQ people on the basis of how we have learned to treat blacks. We will not change what we do to these other people who are on the receiving end of isms until we change what we are doing to our brown and black population. We can change this if we choose to. And don't you dare tell me that one person can't make a difference. Don Celestino is one person. He has made a tremendous negative difference in this country. Now it's going to take the rest of the 45% of us who absolutely will not let him back into the White House even to visit after August, which is when he thinks he's going to go back to being president. The rest of us, the 48% can keep 45 to 48% can keep that from happening. If you get off your polyunsaturated fatty acids and refuse to go along with this nonsense. And that's the problem. Individuals have to refuse to go along to get along. You'll make some enemies. But you've got children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to think of. I've got 3 great-grandchildren, and I want them raised in a country that is free of the ignorance of racism.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, which is a stop doing, is emphatically said stay away from Fox News and Facebook. And I really see Fox News and the right-wing media as brain poison. I mean, they're just it's the lies, and also race entertainment. They have just been pushing the critical race theory. I think it was something like in a week they mentioned it 900 times. So that to me is just race entertainment, keeping those.
They don't understand what they're talking about. They don't understand what critical race theory is. It is critical of the idea of several different races. And it should be. There's only one race. There are no biracial people. There are many mosaic people. A mosaic is a new art form that is unique and beautiful and composed of many elements. That's what we call biracial. That's mosaic. It is not biracial. There's only one race on the face of the earth, and that's what critical race theory is trying to tell you, that we've had the wrong idea all these years. The theory of race is a lie, and we have to criticize it, and we have to destroy it, because you and I are 30th to 50th cousins. Make no mistake about that. If we traced our DNA back, the two of us, we would both find that we have DNA that came from a country in Africa. That's the way it is, people. Mr. Biden wants to bring us together.
Well,
we are together. We must not allow somebody to separate us.
I don't think Fox News or the right-wing media machine or the other right-wing stations even care what critical race theory is, but it keeps the eyeballs on their television. It keeps people listening to them, and it's used in a very insidious way and created, I think, like a boogeyman that's become so powerful because the GOP can put anything into that bucket of critical race theory, and they don't have to explain any of it.
Well, the GOP stands for greedy old boots. That's what they are. And the right wing are wrong. They are the wrong wing. You have to realize that they are not right. They do not have right on their side unless you want to make money. And they know how to make money. And if you haven't read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, for the love of God, get it and read it. And you'll find out that one of the biggest moneymakers in this nation is the prison system, the prison industrial system. It is absolutely insane that we are still supporting the prison industrial system. And finally, Joe Biden has said we are going to close these private prisons. Because, and another thing you need to realize is charter schools are an attempt to have a group of students who learn how to manage the country, whose parents can afford to pay to send them to charter schools, paid for partially by the government, and those in the public schools are going to learn how to be peons, how to be people who do the hard work, the manual labor that has to be done in this country. And that's what's going to happen with charter schools, and it is happening with charter schools right now, and you need to read the book, Rich Thanks to Racism, before you understand how insidious the idea of charter schools really is.
Now, you've
This is
listed...
not a step in the right direction. This is a tremendous step backward. Do not enroll your children in charter schools, because the people who are running them are making a killing of the ignorance of the people who believe that they will get a better education. And if you don't, read the book Rich Thanks to Racism, and what this man says about what happens in charter schools. I've seen children in charter schools out on field trips. It is the most Hitlerian atmosphere I have ever seen for children. They know how to march in step. They know how to dress just the way the rest. It's just terrifying what some of these charter schools are doing.
Well, I also know that there was a principal in a charter school in New York that was making over $300,000 a year, and there's no principal in any of our public schools that make that. Dr. Elliott, I can't thank you enough for your fiery passion. I have been literally sitting on the edge of my seat this whole hour, and I want to thank you again. I also want to thank Be Bold America's program engineer, Emily Donham, and our program director, Howard Feldstein. And once again, give a huge thank you to our bold and impressive guest, Dr. Jane Elliott. On Sunday, August 1st, on Be Bold America, our topic will be demystifying Sharia and why it's not taking over our country. Pettis and I have the honor to speak with Sumbul Ali Karamali on her new book, Demystifying Sharia, what it is, how it works, and why it's not taking over our country. Sumbul Ali Karamali is an award-winning author and popular speaker whose books, articles, blogs, and speaking events are her way of promoting intercultural understanding in the world. Sumbul is a Muslim American who grew up in California, and as long as she can remember, she's been answering questions about Islam. After becoming a corporate lawyer, she earned an additional degree in Islamic law. With her new book, she hopes to demystify Sharia, at least when she's not watching Star Trek. Please join Pettis and me on Sunday, August 1st at 5 p.m. to hear Sumbul Ali Karamali, a fellow Star Trekker, on the topic of demystifying Sharia. And I want to say again, thank you to Dr. Elliott for her fiery passion. It is contagious, and we were so lucky that she had the time to be with us tonight. You're listening to KSQD Santa Cruz, many voices, one station. Listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. Stay tuned for Reflections on Buddhism with Ven Tenzin Chagi and Patrick McGinn. My name is Jill Cody.
And I'm Dr. Pettis Perry.
And thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.